Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 preview for the Shriners Children's Open. Gonna make sure you're ready for all of your DFS and prop exposure out there for the final day of action. So first off, gonna start off with a weather report. Make sure we cover on some of those course conditions, and then cycle into the DFS side of things. Go through what to expect over there for the showdown slate, some lineup construction, ownership, a few plays that I'll be getting to myself, and then the prop side of things there at the end, where we'll go through the price picks in the Underdog board. But wherever you guys are, hopefully you're having a fantastic evening, whether you're just chilling with some buddies, just got home ready to dive into some golf research. Let's go ahead, get after it, and hopefully end this week strong. So we got Antonio down there. First off, cheers to you. I've got a little Red Bull over here to help stay up a little bit. I've got some football stuff to do after, so definitely want to make sure I'm fully attentive for that. So let's go ahead, hop on into a little plug before we start this live stream. So first off, I want to remind you guys of the presenting sponsor of the stream, which of course are our friends over at the Ship It Nation. So a great source for all your needs in DFS, not just golf and football that I cover here on the channel, but sports like NBA when that comes around, which is coming right around the corner. We've got NHL, NASCAR, UFC analysis that they have there on their site, all with great projections, process-based tips out there for every sport, and led by Hoop and Tambo, who are great guys over there on Twitter, X, and that run the Ship It Nation. So a great website, great partnership that we have here with the channel. And if you use code Luke10, you get a discount off any membership there to help get you in the door. Check out what they have to offer. And I think they have great stuff over there, very reliable projections. And I like that they cater a lot of their process-based stuff out there to every sport that you're entering. So if you've been wondering how to play NASCAR DFS, some of like the correlation to go after, how to play the starting spots, all that different really complicated stuff, especially if you're just getting into DFS, make sure to go over there to the Ship It Nation. So a great resource, great partner, and let's go ahead and hop on in. So the golf course today did play to the sort of conditions we expected. I thought it might play about 2.5 under par. That is exactly what we got for play so far. I think it's going to get a little bit easier. So it might even get to like 2 3/4 under par after play ends tomorrow. But if you take a look at the first versus second half of players, the first half only played 1.5 under par. The second half played 3 strokes under. So the wind was supposed to die down as the day went on. And you saw that effect out there between the first and the second half. And this wasn't a whole wave thing. It wasn't like there was 2-3 hours between the first and the second half of tee times. This was just the first 30 or so players versus the last 30 or so players, and split right down the middle. So that's the big effect that you can have out here at the golf course. And if you went out there and played guys towards the top end of the board or guys that just made the cut, like I told you, you probably had yourself a day for showdown. So I just want to circle back to that. I always like to recap the weather edges that we go after. Obviously, still have to wait to see how it all plays out. But considering that tomorrow morning, it looks like it's going to be really calm out there, I would think that the scoring average might even get a little bit better. So once again, having the weather go our way is huge out there for our ROI. So let's once again go ahead and do a double check on it out here for Sunday. Unfortunately, it is going to be threesomes off of both tees again, so it kind of limits the weather edge that we can get. Today was an extreme example of that. I think because of the timing of that wind dying down, it was pretty much like 20 minutes after the leaders teed off, or after the second half of tee times teed off. So it was absolutely perfect for that side of things. Sunday, it looks flat for almost the entire day. So I don't think there's going to be that same kind of effect. I do think that the later starters might have a slightly better scoring average, mostly because it is the guys towards the top of the leaderboard, the players with the best form, also the players that are just the highest talent level of anyone in the field. So that's what I would say about the scoring averages, the wind, the weather in particular out there for Sunday, is that I don't think that there's a huge edge to playing one side or the other. There's placement points in play. We're going to have to have a few guys towards the top end of the board. But because I'm expecting maybe around a -3 scoring average, that is for the final round, I think it'll be 2 3/4 under par out there for round number 3. You're not going to have all guys up there in the top 5. If you have somebody that's starting at like only -3, -4, and they shoot 6 or 7 under par tomorrow, that's going to be a way to get to the optimal lineup as well. So I think you're more so looking for a ceiling performance on Sunday Showdown, as opposed to stacking one way for the other or trying to jam in placement points towards the top. So speaking of, let me go ahead, bring up our Showdown projections. We'll talk through what to expect out there for Sunday. where you're going to see some placement potential towards the top end of my player pool. The further up in the pricing I am, the more likely I am to go after some of those placement points. Whereas with my 8K and especially my 6 and 7K options, they're going to be players that are distinctly trying to get leverage, that are going to be, in most cases, sub 10% owned, a lot of cases, sub 5% owned out there in GPPs. So Sunday Showdown's a little bit of a different beast compared to rounds 2 and 3. Rounds 2 and 3, I'm much more leveraged than what you're going to see here. So if the ownership numbers seem a little bit high, that's just a byproduct of Sunday Showdown. You've got to have a little bit more ownership, a little bit more of that chalk because of that placement point aspect. So I would say in single entries, you might even want to be a little bit more different about your exposure, because in single entries, you don't need the absolute nuts to go out there and win. The reason why you play guys with placement point potential out there on Sunday Showdown, especially like large field GPPs, is that if the winner, by the way, is going to shoot like -7, -8 tomorrow, you're going to have that sort of player. If somebody out there that's starting like 3-4 shots off the lead shoots -7, -8, maybe doesn't win the golf tournament, but is up there in the top 3, you're absolutely going to have that player. So in that's the takedown the big GPP, right? Because you have to have the absolute nuts. Large field GPP, you're going to have to mix in a few pieces of chalk. That's why I say that. But in single entry, not so much. If you want to leverage, really try and move up those leaderboards when your guys hit, you can always take that approach as well. So just wanted to say that before we really dive player by player, as depending on the contest that you're entering really dictates what you're looking for in players. If you're in a single entry, that sort of thing, I'd be looking at ball striking metrics. I'd be trying to find guys that have potential high points per dollar projection out there in my lineups. Whereas if I'm in a GPP, we're going to need 2-3 guys that could finish in that top 3 at the end of the day, and probably 2-3 guys for some leverage as well. So let's see if there's anything down in chat in terms of questions. And if not, we're going to hop on in. What's going on, Joseph? What's going on? C. Floyd says you're sweating a little showdown GPP. Thanks to your advice. Love to hear it. Hopefully you can run well there tomorrow morning. So best of luck to you. Can Spawn get it done? That would be nice. Also, Kurt Kitayama I took for an outright. So if one of those two could do it, that would be great. We've also got round 4 pins. Antonio says that is music to my ears. So let's just go player by player. We're going to do this rather quickly as it's getting a little bit late over here on the East Coast. I don't want to be too loud here for some of my neighbors. But Taylor Pendrith, $10,900. He's the sort of player that I like for Sunday Showdown. If you're going to take some ownership towards the top, it's just a few shots off the lead. I mean, depending on how he finishes his round tomorrow, could even be there towards the final group. So I like that aspect. I like how he's been hitting the ball so far this week. He's been pretty solid with his shots gained ball striking. Last 2 rounds haven't been quite as sharp as his -10 start to the week, which is almost impossible to go out there and back up. But now that he's 2 rounds removed from that nuclear round, I think you've got to kind of reset him. And I mean, he was the favorite heading into the week for a reason. So though he is towards the top end of the pricing and 25.5% owned, I think it's well worth it. And I would argue that he's maybe even a little bit lower owned than he should be. So somebody like Davis Thompson is also in that same ownership range. You can see Kurt Kitayama is a play I'm getting to, also extremely popular at 27%. Up top, outside of Bo Hostler, who I've got at sub 8% ownership, everyone else up here is at least 15%. So like even down here in the 9K range, you have players like a Schmid at, I believe, like 13-14%. That is about as low as it gets if you're not somebody like a Slappy at -5. So there's not that much leverage to even begin with towards the top end of the board. And I guess if you were going to take that approach, the only starting point would be Bo Hostler there at -5. So somebody I prefer instead, or if there's not going to be that much leverage, then I'm going to play Kurt Kitayama when he is, let me double check on the shots gained metrics. I believe the number, 2 shots gained ball striking player in the field. So he only trails Doug Gim in that category, who, spoiler alert, we'll be talking about here in just a few minutes. But he's 27% owned. So you've got to know that if you're using him in a lineup. If you're starting with Kitayama at $10,200, you're going to have to offset that ownership at some point, particularly in a large field contest. So there's pros and cons to taking these sort of players, but in a format where you've got to take some placement point potential, particularly in a GPP, I think the best spot to do it is with your spend ups, not so much when you're down there in that 6 and 7K range. JT Poston, another player that's been absolutely striping it this week. In fact, if we take a look at the weekly shots gained ball striking stats, he's number 3 in the field. So he's number 3 behind Kitayama and Gim, a player that is normally a more putting-based player. So when I see him going out there and hitting the ball as consistently as he has, he's another conviction spot that I'll get to. So, I mean, the ownership's disgusting on these top 3. I mean, JT Poston's tied for the lead. So as you'd expect, he'd be relatively popular. But if there's a piece of chalk to go out there and use, somebody that is going out there and doing it in a sustainable fashion, which is usually out there with their ball striking stats. JJ Spawn is close enough to the lead where you could even consider him for a potential live ad. So I know Antonio was asking about his chances, or maybe it was Joseph that said that down there in chat. I think he could pull it off. I mean, he's close enough, especially if he makes a run on his last few holes. I think he has maybe 1-2 left to finish. But in terms of fantasy point projection, he's one of the top on the entire slate. In fact, you compare him to guys like Pendrith Kitayama, who are more expensive, also up there in the fold. He's got higher projection than both of those players, and he's only $9,100. So what that shows you is that it's not all about your leaderboard position. Like in comparison to a JT Poston here, he's got nearly an 8-point higher projection. That's why I prefer some of these scores, guys that are close to the lead, maybe not starting at -15, to go out there and get the job done. Now, Poston's maybe not the best example because I love him too with his shots gained ball striking, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what I'm looking for in players. In terms of shots gained ball striking, I don't think JJ Spawn is towards the top end of the board, but he's gaining across all 4 stat categories over his first 3 days. And yeah, everything's been very solid. Nothing has been otherworldly, nothing over like 2 shots gained per round, but everything well into the positive, which is a nice thing to see in its own, right? You took Kitty too. There you go. Yeah, we got a couple guys up there then. Gim is literally the Reaper on this course. Hey, it's his home course. So if you're a big home course narrative guy, I guess you can strut your stuff this week on what you're seeing, but we'll see. I like him, that's for sure, out here in round 4 showdown. So that's the ultimate segue here to our next play, but he's $8,600. What I like about the Gim Reaper is that he's the #1 player in the field when it comes to shots gained ball striking. And just like we had there with the last play, is gaining across all 4 stat categories. So maybe it's him being comfortable at his own course, his home turf, sleeping in his own bed, all those things that you hear from players. I just like what I'm seeing on paper. I don't really care about the narrative, right? I throw that out the window. As I already mentioned with our other conviction plays, looking for sustainable shots gained metrics. And if we're looking for that, he's the #1 player in the category. And surprisingly, I've only got him at about 22% ownership. So perhaps that's because he's not like a 10K player. The ownership isn't nearly as condensed down there in that range as it is towards the top end of the board. If he is only going to be 22%, then I would be thrilled out there in large field GBPs. A few other pieces of chalk. So I don't just like to mention the guys I'm using, right? I like to talk some of the strategy towards the top end of the board as well. Worth noting that a Hoey, a Matt Kuchar are getting a little bit of steam up there in the 9K range. Most popular players outside of Poston would be guys like a Harris English, Matthias Schmid getting a few looks as well. And then Davis Thompson is also over 25% owned. And then a Harry Hall is about 20% himself. So there's a healthy amount of ownership on a lot of plays towards the top. And it's relatively spread out for the most part. So I know I mentioned that before, but I wanted to circle back on a few of those specific players. Down here in the top end of the 7s, I guess Bridgman, Taylor Moore also getting some attention there. If I was going to take a piece of chalk, though, I think Gary Woodland's the piece that I would most rather have. A long-term, just absolute striper of the golf ball. Had been returning from some pretty scary stuff when it came to his personal health. First off, if you haven't seen that, go out there, check it out. It's well worth the 5-10 minute read out there in Gary Woodland and what he came back from this year. But he's finally looking like the old Gary Woodland, which is won a major, multiple-time PGA Tour winner. And this is the kind of field where Gary Woodland, that sort of comeback story could result in a win, right? He's got the pedigree. We know that he knows how to win in crunch time. And while he hasn't had maybe the best year so far, it has started to look a lot sharper recently. His shot gained ball striking has been there all of 2024. But more importantly, the around the green and the putting has started to turn around towards the latter half of this year. So it's definitely gone to its apex this week. So if we take a look at the shots gained metrics, he's gaining across all 4 stat categories. And most significantly, it's surprising if you've been watching him this year, he's gaining just under 2 shots gained putting per round. And that's over the first 3 rounds, right? That's not like a 1-round sample size where we're checking this after Thursday. This is over the first 2 3/4 rounds out there for Gary Woodland. So I think that's a very positive sign, and I'm going to play him out there on Sunday. A few other relatively popular players. I guess Hubbard getting some steam, a KH Lee at -13, a little bit over that, I think 11% ownership number himself. Ryan Moore as well, getting a few looks, but I like a Davis Riley. So he's in that same conversation when it comes to placement points. He's starting at -9, you shoot -6, -7, and it might not be a top 5. It could be on the fringe of a top 10 finish. But he's the sort of player where you could get those actual scoring points, not so much the placement that you're worrying about with Davis Riley, but more so the birdie or better upside that he's bringing to the table. You saw him run the table today out there with a bunch of birdies. He's a long player. He's going to try and set up as many eagle looks as possible, extremely aggressive, which is useful around this style of golf course. You've got the 3 par 5s, a drivable par 4, another hole that is potentially drivable as well, depending on wind direction, and he's 10.5% owned. So in comparison to a few other players that I just brought up as chalky, he's lower owned than a few of those other guys. So I would say Bud Cauley is that same sort of player, is a little bit lower owned than some of the other guys in this range, like comparing them to a KH Lee, and maybe you want to take a look at guys like a Cauley or a Davis Riley. Chris Gotterup has got some really good ball striking stats to this point of the week. So if we take a look at the shots gained ball striking, he's gaining 1.4 shots gained off the tee per round and about 3/4 of a stroke approach per round as well. So what is that? Over 2 strokes combined out there with his ball striking, which I believe is top 10 in the field, or at least on the fringe of top 10, if not there. So solid stuff. Sorry, wrong tab there. Didn't mean to click that. And playing them at 2% ownership. So not getting that much steam. An example of an early starter. Actually, -4. I'd have to double check on his tee time. So let me actually do that real quick. Let's sort this by score and see where -4 is. -4 is T52. So probably like a mid tee time out there for Chris Gotterup. So it's not so much like the weather edge. I don't think there's really a weather edge at all out there for Sunday to begin with. It's more so just trying to find leverage down low. If you're going to use some of those 25 to 30% owned players that we are towards the 9-10 range, or at least I am out there in my lineups, we're going to have to offset that. And a 2% owned player is a really solid spot to do so. And maybe the scorecard would indicate that he's playing well at -4, but the ball striking has certainly been there. David Lipsky at 5.1%, another guy I'm using to get a little bit different. He's a local Las Vegas guy, so he knows how to play this style of golf. He's played well at the Shriners in the past. And if you guessed it, if you take a look at his approach stats and off the tee, it's been mighty fine solid to this point of the week. So if I go ahead, double check on the exact numbers for you, let me type in Lipsky over here on Data Golf. He's been solid across all 4 categories. The only stat category where he's losing to the field would be his shots gained off the tee, which a lot of that has come down to penalty shots, which has kept them from the top end of the leaderboard. But all 3 other categories, approach, around the green, and putting, have been well into the green. So I like that for Lipsky. Hopefully can drive the ball a little bit more accurately there Sunday, but home course is played here quite a bit, is stationed out of Las Vegas, which has worked out for Doug Gim, has worked out for a few other players, not so much for Bramlett over the weekend, and not so much for David Lipsky. So we'll have to see if they can buck the trend out there Sunday. Let's go over here to chat. Cooch is still decent. Yeah, he's been playing solid golf, dude. Respect to him, that's for damn sure. We got Davis Thompson, might not win tomorrow, but he'll be interesting to watch. I agree with that. He's already showed us that we can compete on tougher courses like Pinehurst number 2. I would say if he wins again, Mark, he'd at least be in the conversation for that, especially if he can finish top 30, get there to East Lake. I think he's probably got to do it one more time to get on that kind of stage, but he's the kind of player that could ascend to that level. So we'll have to see. I'm personally maybe not as bullish on him as you seem to be, but I think that he's got an opportunity to take a step forward. Like we saw Cam Davis try and do it, and a little bit of pushback. I know he plays in the President's Cup, but not quite a Ryder Cup level sort of player like it would be for the U.S. We'll see. I'm not quite so sure. There's a lot of talented kids out there, and you'd have to take someone off. The leaders still have some holes to go, and Woodland is finished. But what are my thoughts on the top 5 at plus 210? So, yeah, you've got to incorporate that. Leaders probably going to get to maybe minus 17, minus 18 by the end of round number 3. Plus 210, it's top 5. So you've got some leeway there. I think it's an okay bet. I'm not sure that it's massive value, but I do like Woodland tomorrow. He's got a really good pedigree. And yeah, we're going to take a look at those when we get to props for sure, Antonio. Before we do that, though, I do want to build a lineup or two together, go through that over there on DraftKings, and then we're going to cycle over there to DraftKings and Underdog. Underdog and Prize Picks, I should say. I mean, in terms of our lineup construction, I've already kind of gone through it as we went through our player pool, but towards the top end of the board is where I'm looking for most of my placement points. The reason for that is the chalk down low is like 15, sometimes even 20% owned, and I don't want to play 40% of some slappies that are $6,000-$7,000 in a fall series event. This isn't even the 6-7K range of a major where you've got just some sketchy players to start with. This is the 6-7K range of the Shriners Children's Open. So I think you'd be best to remind yourself of that before going out there and building lineups, and know that if you're going to try and find these placement points, which again, I think in GPPs are most important just because you're trying to hit the absolute nuts, you do it with your 8, 9, and 10K range players. Now, you could mix in a 7K range player if you absolutely had to, but it is going to force your hand with ownership towards the mid to top end of the board. You might have to play a Bo Hostler, who is not going to get you any placement points starting at -4, -5, whatever it is. There's pros and cons to taking that kind of strategy. So what I prefer, as you guys can tell, is to do that towards the top. So let's go ahead, start off with a Kurt Kitayama here, a second man in. I'm going to use a JJ Spawn. These are my 2 outright sweats, so I'm obviously hoping they do well. I'm going to be higher on some other players for round 4 showdown as a little bit of a hedge against that action. But I think they're fantastic starting points out there in your lineups. I'm a little biased because I like them so much at this course, but if you're going to start off with some chalk up top, some placement points, that's what you get with those 2 players. Our third man in, I think I want to put in like a fringe placement point kind of guy. It's like somebody that could finish top 10, but that doesn't necessarily have to be chalky. So an example of that kind of player, like a Johnny Vegas, would fit that kind of mold. I think he's probably the best example, but maybe a Patrick Fishburne here at -9. The bonus with Fishburne is that his ball striking stats have been more than solid to this point of the week. In fact, if we go over here to shots gained ball striking and we sort it over the first 3 days, you can see him down here just behind Matthias Schmid, gaining, over 2 strokes per round in terms of his shots gained ball striking. So we've compared him to a few other players that have done that same sort of thing, and he's actually a little bit lower owned some of the other options there. So let's use him at $8,500. He's got that fringe placement point potential. Our last 3 players here, I want at least 2 sub 5% owned players. So I'm going to go ahead and just knock those out of the way right now. I'm not going to wait to the last 2 spots to try and find their differentiation. So I'm going to throw in a Chris Goddard. I'm also going to try and take a sub 5%er over here at the bottom end of the 7K range. And we're going to use Joseph Bramlett. So I already mentioned Goddard was a play that I like. Bramlett, it's got that home course narrative going into solid ball striking stats. So just like some of the other plays that we've gone through, Bramlett, let's see. Let's just type them in here and make it easier to find. You can see gaining 1.7 shots gained off the tee per round, and then a half a stroke approach. So once again, over 2 shots gained ball striking per round. Our last man in, I can't go through all 6 plays, of course, because they don't want us to build full lineups over here per the DraftKings terms of service. But you could really take whoever you wanted to because you've got these 2 sub 5%ers. But if you forced in another player that's sub 10%, so maybe you avoided like a Bridgman that's a little more popular. You avoided your Hubbards, especially like Woodland, even down here at $7,600, you would be totally fine for sure out there, Largeville GPP. Now, if you forced the hand a little bit, maybe you took a Bridgman or Woodland, as previously mentioned, then you might be toting that line a little bit of being duplicated, of having enough leverage out there in your lineup. But having those 2 sub 5%ers is massive, especially when you have another sub 10%er out there in Patrick Fishburne. So your last man in here is where I guess you can, choose to, be a little bit more creative, implement your own process a little bit for your last man in. But the fact of the matter is you need at least 2, maybe 3 guys that can get placement points. And then in terms of your leverage, you need at least 2 out there in the large field GPP. And then that third is, I think, where you can tinker around with it a little bit. So that's what I would say about your lineup construction. Just be smart, think through everything when you're building lineups. You shouldn't just be blindly using your player pool to generate lineups. Like on an optimizer, for example, you need to either be setting a cumulative ownership cap, or what I prefer, a product ownership cap over there on your optimizer. So you can also set a role to make sure that you're getting placement points out there in your lineup if you're going to play out there in the large field GPP. Because what I've seen people do before, especially if you're trying to play the ownership game out there in your player pool, is that you won't have enough guys with placement points out there. And when you're generating lineups out there on the solver, whatever optimizer that you're using, it gives you a lot of lineups with just 5-6 pivots, which is fine for rounds 2-3 showdown. In fact, I embrace that quite a bit. Round 4 showdown, though, is something that you absolutely can't do. So let me actually, my Discord's giving me buzzes right now. So let me change my online status so that doesn't happen anymore. But as I was saying out here with your lineup construction is you want to make sure that you're embracing the game theory component and making sure that you're getting the placement points, because you can't win a GPP without the winner, without those guys that get up there into the top 2, top 3. So just make sure that you're accounting for all that out there in your lineup. So let me see if there's any last second questions. That's all I've got for DFS, though. We're going to go through props now over there on Prize Picks and Underdog. But if you have any last second stuff that you want me to cover there for DraftKings, just let me know down there in the chat. If not, best of luck out there with all of your round 4 lineups. And let's get after it for the rest of the fall swing. We've got Zozo, forget what's after that, then Arsum Classic, I believe, which I'll probably be at over there in St. Simons Island, Georgia. So looking forward to those a few events, the round 4 showdown, of course. And now let's get over there the props. So first thing I want to do is bring up the pin sheet, as I do want to look at that before we go through all these props. So there's the pin sheet. And then I also want to bring up Prize Picks, because I know for a fact that they had some props posted. Underdog, they had the Eurogolf stuff posted, but I don't believe PGA yet. So we'll have to see what they do. So let's go over here. Let's refresh this. So here's the Eurogolf stuff that I was just talking about. And then PGA is not posted over there in Underdog yet. So we've got that. And then I guess we can look at some of the Eurogolf odds. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. I can show you guys. One of the plays I've already gone to is a Eurogolf prop. So I can show you guys where I got that from and the odds that we're referring to. That'll be on DraftKings. 1 second, guys. Did they, wrong event. I was looking at the Shriners. That explained things. Okay. There's the Eurogolf stuff. And then let's do this. So over here on the prop side of things, we've got the stat averages first that I want to go through. So stat averages for the Shriners are as of all holes completed. So these are going to change a little bit in the morning, but it's not really going to sway our thought process all that much. Sunday, with how calm it's supposed to be, it should be a good scoring day. The wind direction is the same as it was for the first few days, which is the first day was the most optimal wind direction that we had. It's going to be a similar strength and direction to what we had on Thursday morning. So just to go back to that, I think that's probably the best time to look at the stat averages. It played minus 3.38, and that was before the cut line. So you had a lot of lower tier players, guys that were going to end up missing the cut, that inflated that scoring average down. So I would say that for your round 4 scoring average, that 3.5 under par is within play, especially if the forecast holds up. If it's going to be sub 5 miles an hour for the entire day, these guys are going to get after the course, especially the players that are playing Sunday at this event. The best form, the best, just the guys that are hitting the ball the best out there on Sunday. So these scoring averages may improve a bit. I would say a birdie or better average could get closer to even 5 per round. Bogey average 2, maybe even slightly below 2 per round, which is where you're going to get that difference potentially with the score. So fairways hit, greens regulation. We haven't gotten props for either of those categories the entire week. So I have them on there. I guess if you're curious about what the averages were, they're there for you, but not going to be that useful unless that changes. Eurogolf side, the scoring average got a little bit better, which was expected with the weather improving day to day. And Sunday, the weather actually looks a little bit better than what it was for moving day. So this scoring average could even get to something around 2 under par tomorrow. And your birdie or better average, it might get to like 4.5 per round. So I wouldn't expect that much movement just because your Sunday pins are likely going to be a little bit tougher than what you had for round 3. And the weather difference isn't all that much. So we'll show you the forecast for Euro before we actually go through a few props. But we're going to start with PGA just because we've already talked a lot on that side already. So for PGA, they had a board over here on Prize Picks, and I was looking a little bit through it before. We also have a pick 6 board. Thanks for the heads up. And yeah, we got to look at pins. Reminding myself there. We got a Højgaard under 68.5. So he's even money there. I don't think it's the worst bet. He's got to shoot -4 to go out there, cover that, which is 2 shots gained to the field. He averages 1.65 shots gained per round this year on the DP World Tour. I know that because I took a prop from him and did research on it. So I guess it's a little different after his really good moving day performance. I would say that that's a good bet, especially, I mean, I'm going to show you the weather. It looks relatively calm out there Sunday. He's just got to keep up the putting form. Round 2, the putter abandoned him a little bit, but he got back to it out there moving day, which you could see coming from a mile away. I mean, he's a really good putter, and he missed a lot of 3 to 7 footers out there round 2. That just wasn't going to happen again. Pick 6 board is up small, but it's up. Yeah, you know, I can't play over there, so I don't look at it very often, to be frank with you. And the product is pretty piss poor, so I don't think that many people play it. So if you want me to look at it, Michael, I can. But yeah, like these strokes look mega low. Like 66.5 is kind of laughable. So just from like a first glance, if I was going to play anything, it'd be overs on strokes. Like just to compare them, like 66.5 on a lot of these players. On Prize Picks, they're an entire stroke to an entire stroke and a half higher. So if I could play it, maybe I would mix in a few of these fades. But unfortunately, right, you can't just go like 5 overs on strokes. And I guess like to pick out my favorites, like you pick some of the guys that are tied for first, like especially Hostler. That feels like a really good fade. That's probably my favorite out of all of these. But you couldn't do like just 2 fades and take a slip, right? You have to have an over and an under to be eligible to enter it. So you could, I guess, try and take an under on one of these 5.5 birdies, but yeah, I can't play it, so I just don't have that much interest. Do you have any questions? Just let me know, man. But we're going to deep dive the stuff that I actually cover for the most part here. So we're going to start over here on Prize Picks, where they don't have a massive selection either, which when you have delays like this, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get a pretty piss poor selection, but we can still try and find some value. So there's 68.5s, mostly Ricky Fowler was standing out to me, who I know I didn't point this out before, but let me show you what Ricky Fowler's been up to the first 3 days. He's been gaining 1.8 strokes off the tee per round. He's been a little bit better than average on approach, which, you know, it's nothing to write home about. He's just been a little bit better than a pretty shitty field. But that's 2 shots gained ball striking per round, right? 1.99 over his first 3 days. And that's solid for Ricky. He's been missing a lot of putts. The putter's been hot and cold the first 3 rounds. So we're going to need that to turn around out there on Sunday to shoot something like -6, -7. But he's hitting the ball well enough, especially off the tee. He's been striping it the first 3 days to go out there and shoot that kind of score. So he's T24. If he goes out there, has a ceiling performance that could result in a top 10, maybe top 5, if he were to go super low out there Sunday. So the reason why I like this out here for Prize Picks is he's at 68.5. So that's a -2.5 projection. We'd have to shoot a -368 to go under that. I think the scoring average might be a 68. Let me double check on Data Golf. They actually, I had to bring this down. I don't want to leak their projections. They've got the round 4 scoring average at 2 under. I respect their opinion on golf courses, so I like to take a look at it. I think it's going to be lower than that. I think it's going to probably play to maybe even a -3 scoring average because it's so much calmer in the weather forecast. So a Ricky, he's been hitting the ball so consistently so far, might not be the worst idea for an under 68.5. So we're not going to have the sportsbook odds to compare to, but I would take that regardless. You got Gary Woodland at 68.5 too. So I like the Ricky Fowler one for sure. The Gary Woodland one I'm a little bit more sketched about, just because actually I probably shouldn't be there. They're pretty much the same tier player. So if I'm going to like one, I should probably like the other. But I did want to look at some of the Euro golf stuff over here. So a prop that I've already played myself is this Victor Perez over on strokes. I brought up some of these Euro golf odds before just so I could show you this. And I do want to bring up the Euro golf weather forecast too. So I guess before I go over this Victor Perez over that I took, it's not an under on strokes. It is a fade out there for Sunday. Remember that it's a par 72. So an over at 68.5 means I'm taking him to shoot -3 or worse, which is, it's a very low line in terms of projection. So Victor Perez has not had the greatest form recently. He has had a pretty solid year. But if you take a look at this forecast, the later in the day that you tee off, the gustier that it's going to get. So like in the morning, it's only 5 to 10. It's only 48 towards the start of play. And by the time they get to noon and especially into the afternoon, you've got wind gusts in that 17 to 15 mile an hour range. And what you saw with the scoring today is that it was super good out there at the golf course because the winds were pretty much non-existent. And a player like Victor Perez, they're going in threesomes off of both tees, by the way. So the tee time situation is going to be a little bit different. Victor Perez is T56, so he'll actually have a relatively late tee time, which when we go back over here to the weather situation, means that he's going to be playing in some of those late gusty conditions and on the harder side of the golf course as well. So let me actually confirm that. I believe the harder side of the golf course. Actually, no, we'll be having the windy conditions on the easier side. So I guess I'll have a harder time going out there and scoring on some of the easier holes. I guess it doesn't really matter that much, or maybe a little bit out there, which side that he's starting on, the front versus the back. But he already has sketchy form to begin with. And then when you look at the sportsbook odds over here, Olesen, who's that same tier player, he's playing really well this week. He's up there starting in, I believe, the top 15. He's -140 towards the over. So we're not actually going to have a line to compare here. But what you'll see is like Romain Langasque, he's maybe a slightly lower tier player, but he has a whole stroke higher, and he's -145 towards the over, -160 towards the over, and that's at 69.5. A lower tier player in Zanotti, but it's not like Victor Perez is a world killer over here on the DP World Tour. So Johannes Veerman, he's about even money over there at 69.5. That's why I like that kind of over. So that's, if you wanted to mix that in with these two props, you could make a 5x payout. The 5x payout's not the greatest over here on Prize Picks. So what I would probably do is take this Ricky Fowler prop, the one that I was eyeing up before. Maybe you mix it in with this over on Victor Perez. Or if you don't want to do a combination slip, you just play the under on Ricky Fowler, then the under on Gary Woodland strokes. That's probably how I would approach this slate. What we're doing over here with the strokes unders is taking advantage of what I think could be a -3 scoring average, and then two players that have been doing it in a sustainable fashion, right? Going out there, playing solid, repeatable golf for the first 3 days, and that weren't way putting over their head. Weren't going out there just chipping in on every single hole, doing it with their off the tee and their approach play. So that's what I like out there on Prize Picks. Underdog, I guess I'll refresh it, see if they've posted anything, but it was just Eurogolf stuff before. So we'll do one last look. So yeah, PGA is still there in the dark. The over on Victor Perez is available over there on the Underdog side. So if they post a PGA board, you could choose to take that over there on that site. Doesn't really matter. I think you'll get the same payout, 3x, regardless of what combination you're going with. But they've got the exact same projections. So everything that we are looking at over there on Prize Picks, I guess you could apply over there to Underdog on Eurogolf. Sorry, we want to look at pins too. I keep forgetting to do that. My bad, guys. And I don't even have Twitter up, so that's probably why I haven't gotten to that yet. The pin sheet for round 4, I did a little glance at it before we went live. I did see that posted over there before we actually got on here. But let's take a look at it together here. So the whole first hole is a little tricky over there in that back right corner. I'd say the second one's a little tricky too, tucked over there in that back left bunker, or very close to it, I should say. 3 is a back right pin. 4 is an easy one. 5 is extremely difficult over there in the back right Sunday pin location. Even 6 is a little bit tricky. 7's an easy one. So you're getting a few bones, like especially with like 4 and 7. But 8 is a long, difficult par 3 to begin with. Might play close to 260 yards tomorrow. 9 is tucked just over a bunker. 10's a back right pin. 11 is tucked in the way back left over a bunker. 12 is near the water. Like you get the point at this point, right? Like every hole is, I don't know, it's not nearly as easy as what you had for round number 3. So they're clearly trying to fight back a little bit when it comes to the difficulty. Like 18, I think, is another good example of a real difficult pin location. But there's only so much that you can do with a golf course when it's already a birdie fest. You've got like the drivable par fours, all those par fives to score on. No wind. I mean, round number 1, just to circle back to those scoring averages, it played minus 3.4. And that was with amateurs playing. Sorry, let's go back to day number 1 here. Played minus 3.4 out there in the morning wave, which is comparable conditions to what we're going to get tomorrow, with all those shitty tier players mixed into that scoring average. So that's why I still think it'll play relatively easy. I mean, if we had easy pin locations like what we had for the first day, then I might say a -4 scoring average compared to what we had out there Thursday. So that's why I'm not going overboard when it comes to my projections. But these guys at 68.5, let's say that these pins are maybe a little bit easier than what I'm expecting, which they look pretty tricky to me, but maybe these guys still get after it, then those unders would be even better value, if anything. So I try to be conservative about my projections, trying to go overboard when I see an edge, but conditions should be ripe for the taking. That's for damn sure. Alrighty, guys, that's all I've got for the live stream. I'm going to go ahead and call it quits here. I've got some NFL stuff I've got to get to for my Patreon members. Go ahead, check out the Patreon page for all of the content that you see throughout my videos. That, of course, is where I'm posting the projection sheets that you see over there for Showdown. There's got all my projections, all my exposure out there for Sunday, and where all of my prize picks and underdog prop slips are posted there as well. So on there, I'm posting all my exposure and the reasoning behind each slip. So go out there, join if you guys want that extra content. There's a link in the description of the video to go out there and do so. That's all I've got. Appreciate your support on the channel as per usual. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll be the rest of the fall series events, everything there in 2025, as well as some NFL content throughout the season as well. So subscribe for all of that content. Hit the like button if you guys haven't already, which at this point, if you haven't, what the heck are you guys waiting for? But that's all I've got. Appreciate it, and best of luck tomorrow.